That's game one of the playoffs. Oh, that little Frenchman. The part of this game nobody's talking about. The two controversial moves by Ty. And look who's tweeting about Brooklyn. It's all coming up on tip-off. Boom, 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 boom. I went to bed and the Grizzlies were up 17. Boom, 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 boom. How the heck did the Clippers win that game? Boom, 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 boom. I totally missed it entirely. Boom, 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 boom. I'm lucky I checked the news this morning. I would have talked about Memphis's win. Boom, 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 boom. I guess that's the value of an all-star. Hope you're well. Yeah, I missed that one. I just got up and read all the articles about it. I turned that off, watched the end of my wife and I have been watching Game Change. We finished that up. We actually spent some time together. It's a stunning thing every now and then. Yesterday was a weird day. Called the game in San Antonio. And then by the time I got home, I still had time to go play football out in the backyard with my kids, then have dinner, and then my daughter and I played game two of the Jazz Spurs. They win 96-95. By the way, she hits one of two clutch free throws late, excuse me, it was Devin Harris, which is appropriate that he only hit one of two. But misses the second, gets the rebound, and the Spurs never get a final shot. Okay, so if you're wondering how that played out, and all right, I gotta tell this story. So my daughter plays Little League, and my daughter actually loves play-by-play, and she announces everything she does. Very similar to how I was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, anything I did, I announced. And so she's a little like this. So anyway, she has played Little League, and I was helping out with the kids, and afterwards, she wants to play some more. She's pretty relentless, and we're out playing, and uh, the game just a def. We were playing Yankees Angels. She's on the Yankees, and the game is just that I roll a ground ball to her, and she fields it and throws to me. She's 7, and if she makes the good throw, it's an out, and I'll throw a fly ball to her, and she catches it. That's the game. And then I just make up whether or not the Yankees score or not to try to make the game exciting. And so we're doing this, and we're out in the back, and there's a game going on. There's a bunch of little kids, and then we're in the back, and she says to me, "Daddy, I want play-by-play." Okay, I could not have been more embarrassed. I'm sitting there doing play-by-play of the Yankees Angels imaginary game, and she doesn't know players, so like I'm having every Dave Winfield and every old Yankee that's ever come up to the plate, and every old Angel because they're the only players I know because I don't know any players anymore, um, other than Mike Trout. Hope you got a chance to see him. He was only here a brief time. Anyway, uh, so yeah, so I was doing that, and I was just like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna see this, and just I'm gonna be mocked forever. This is just written for some Twitter thread, but I figure you should do things for your daughter rather than worry about what the public thinks of you. All right. Anyway, game one of the. I don't know. I hope that was funny. To me, it was just classic. And the only other one I would share on that is she's relentless. So I've got this whole game set up that the Yankees score on the bottom of the 8, and they go ahead 6-5, and she's just got to make a few plays. And so she starts making mistakes on purpose because she wants the game to go into overtime, as she calls it, which is extra innings. But uh, of course, she's been following the Jazz this year, so she thinks everything should go into overtime. All right, game one is in the books. I thought we played pretty well. I thought we battled pretty well. As I wrote on Empty the Noggin and said on the broadcast, playing the Spurs with their offensive prowess really feels as though you're on the precipice of a cliff the entire time, and that at any moment, particularly in their building, they're just going to hit a few shots in a row, and you're going to be down by a lot in a hurry. And I think that's a pretty accurate way to look at how that game is. The Jazz did a nice job. They held the Spurs to 2 of 11 from 3, and then that barrage late in the third is what hit them. And really gets into a pick your poison. I'm going to try to do some film study on it, but the obvious issue is that little Frenchman, Tony Parker. But to some extent, if Tony Parker is doing what he's doing, and the Spurs are 2 of 11 from 3, then I'm going to just guess, without having watched any tape, that a lot of what took place is the fact that the Jazz were holding to the shooters, and Parker's getting room to work, and their Jazz are getting back out on the shooters. sacrificing a little bit of Parker being able to score to prevent those guys from going, because they go 6 for 11 for three or 5 for 11 for three. It's over. I mean, heck, they didn't shoot well from three the other night or the other afternoon. Gosh, that killed me. That whole broadcast was like a joke. But they ended up going 6 of 17, which is 35%. I mean, the Jazz had them down 2 for 11. They finished hitting 4 of their final 6. Bonner hitting 3 of 4. And, if you think about that for a second, that's the equivalent to about 52% shooting. I mean, these guys they're the number one effective field goal percentage team in the NBA, and they finish with a pretty darn good effective field goal percentage by the end of the night. They shoot 47%, hit 35% on threes, and they kind of got them. The Jazz kept them off the free throw line for a long time, but then by the end, the Spurs got a good deal of free throws as well. So I don't know. I mean, this is really the essence of why the Spurs are so good. And, we probably have to, as difficult as this is for us, I don't ever want to say you're conceding that you can't beat these guys, but there is probably a reason why they're, 39-7 over their last some odd games. I mean, just nobody's beating them. We have, they've had 2 10-game wins. That was the third time this year that we played them while they were on a 10-game win streak. They've had 3 11-game win streaks, and then they just don't play their guys in the 12th game. So maybe that's what they should do for us in game 2. The only concern I have on that game, and I may be way off on this, but I'm not sure that I felt that was entirely a playoff game. There was a lot of energy, a lot of vibe. I thought we fought pretty well. But there might be some element where our guys just, part of believing you can win, and there's no reasonable reason why we think that. And I almost got a vibe that we were, as I was, frankly, content to be in the game rather than necessarily trying to get going above that. And so that's the one concern, or just I think, hey, let's really play game 2 to win. I thought we played game 1 a little bit to make sure that things didn't go disastrously wrong, that we stayed in the game, that we battled, we fought. We did all those things. That's the experience. I think you just saw that with Chris Paul last night, that, a lot of inexperience, and Chris Paul that was incredible, but there's the whole concept that he was playing that game to win. I, as I said, didn't see it, but I just read the articles and some of the quotes and how he fought with Vinny to check himself back into the game. That's the veteran experience that you have in those circumstances. Denver doesn't have a lot of playoff experience. They got run in LA. The Clippers don't have a lot of playoff experience other than Chris Paul. They got run to start. This is not, we weren't unique in this, but I think that's the next step for us. Everyone's talking about Tony Parker, and I will do a bunch of work on Tony Parker. And I wrote a little thing on Twitter through Sula. Side note, I'm using Sula a little bit, so I feel like, I just Tourette syndromes, you guys, with so many tweets, and I do so much work and have so much information that I'm going to start using that Sula a little bit so that I can combine 5 or 6 tweets into one. If you're really that interested, you'll click through and go see it rather than just having your timeline infested with too much locked on sports tweets. I hope you like that. If you don't, let me know. I can stop doing it. But that's the thought process I have, is that if I get a longer quote or if I get some things that gives me an opportunity to extend out a little bit. So let me know if that's let me know if that works for you. But I'm trying to find ways. I'm not going to stop tweeting because I get that information. I want to share it. I think some of you care, but I got to find a way that it's not 12 tweets every time. Anyway, so I wrote about this a little bit on the Tony Parker quandary. What's interesting is Parker didn't hit his outside shot the other day. He was 2 of 8, I think it was, from 10 feet or more. So the easy answer would seem to be that you just decide to go under on the pick and roll. And again, I'll watch film on this today. but it seems like that's the easy answer. But it's not, because Duncan sets that pick so low that I'm not sure you necessarily are really forcing him into jumpers. I'll still take him taking a 12, 13-foot jumper. He'll hit probably 45, 50% of them, but it's probably better than him getting in the lane. His 7 assists, 4 at the rim, 3 for threes. That's the real problem. As much as everything else Parker did, the 7 assists that lead to 10 point or 17 points is what you've got to try to get rid of on this team. And I think the Jazz did actually a pretty good job of that, and he picked them apart. So I don't know the answer. The Jazz, I thought, battled pretty hard on it. That pick is set so low. Duncan sets it so well. We were trailing, trying to stay above, and then you're a step behind Parker. But is that why he missed the jump shots? Because we were right on him and he never got comfortable? Or did he just miss the jumpers because he's not a very good shooter? And he's not a great shooter. He's never, this whole concept that he's actually improved his shot is really kind of a misnomer. This year, actually, he must have improved as the year went on, because I looked it up throughout the year and it wasn't there. But this year he did shoot 45% on the 10 to 15 footer. He shot 39% from the 16 to 23 footer, which he's always done. But you really have to just believe in that approach. The one thing I noticed in film study prior on Parker, by the way, is if he starts going left and hitting the pull-up jumper left, lights out, game over. That's when he's on fire. He did not do that in game one. He's the key, though. He shoots 50% in wins and 41% in losses. You've got to find some way to deal with him. I might change up who guards him. It'd be interesting to throw Devin Harris on Danny Green for a few possessions, either sliding Gordon over or Damari Carroll or Josh Howard, just to see what they do and what their different approaches. It's not anything they haven't seen before, but Ron Artest, Meta World Peace, has guarded Tony a lot when you watch film. A lot of big guys have guarded Tony in many of those games. When I watched every pick and roll that Tony's run all year. I know I'm not well, but I enjoy it. So you got to deal with that. Here's the issue nobody's talking about today that's got to be discussed. Ben Bagley, I'm relying on you to do this. We didn't score enough to win. We didn't defend enough to win either. But our offensive efficiency in the game was 96.8 points per 100 possessions. 96.8. We shot 30 free throws, which is pretty good for us. We only had 13 offensive rebounds, which is not terrible for us. In fact, our offensive rebounding percentage was up at 31%, which is pretty good. We just didn't make some shots. 2 of 14 from 16 to 23 feet, 4 of 13 from 3. Devin was 0 of 3 on those shots, 1 of 7 overall. Gordon was 2 of 6 on those shots. Those guys have got to make shots for us. And as much as, you're not going to win if you allow 113 points per 100 possessions, which is what we did on the defensive end to Tony Parker. But I would also tell you that very rarely have the Jazz won games where they didn't score 1 point per possession. They've won a few, but it's not often. The Spurs game this year, in which the Spurs didn't play their guys, the win over the Lakers and the close game over the Warriors, we had very bad offensive nights and won those games. And that, I think, is about it for the season. We've got to be able to score to win as well. You've got to be able to defend, obviously. When we allow under a point per possession, when we're allow under 100 points per possession, we win. That has been true. Now, this is not the playoffs anymore, but that is true for at least the last 10, I'm checking it, 11, 12, 13 straight times in which the Jazz have held an opponent to below a point per possession, we've won. And that's the only way you're going to slow down. And that's going to be hard to do because San Antonio is so good offensively. I'm not sure how often the Spurs have been held. I could check the last time the Spurs were held below that is probably few and far between because they're too darn good offensively. And that's why they've won all these games. That gets to the big lineup question. We just did not get the Spurs. By the way, last time they were held under this 100 points per 100 possessions was the loss in LA the day after they lost to Utah. But otherwise, it's happened very rarely, and that's actually the few times they've lost all year. So there is an argument we should just be trying to play defensively, which in turn means Derek Favors should play a lot of minutes. And I think there is an argument to that Al Jefferson is not in this series going to have a tough time on Tim Duncan because Duncan was able to negate kind of what Al does, and Al was really, I thought, a very little factor in that game because of how Duncan defends him. But herein lies the quandary for Tyrone Corbin. I just told you how we have to score to be able to make, and you're going to take your what is perceived as your best scorer off the floor and to bring in Derek Favors for defensive reasons. That's a heck of a debate you're having internally if you're trying to do that because that doesn't necessarily jive with what you're going to feel is right. Without Jefferson on the floor, your instinct is that the Jazz are going to have a really hard time scoring. I would argue unless Jefferson's going to shoot about 55% in this series, he's never going to go to the free throw line against Duncan, that it's going to be very hard for him to be a productive offensive player for the Jazz just because of he's going to have to get really hot. Last night, the other day, he was 8 of 16, and I think most people would agree he did not feel particularly influential in that game. And, that's this may be where numbers lie a little bit, but these are really difficult, tough debates to be had of how you're going to do things. The big lineup just did not get out on the floor, and it didn't get out in the first half. And I'm going to guess Tyrone's going to do that differently in the next game. I don't want to say that. We'll see. And I think it's worth noting that the big lineup did not have the success that it's had. That the Spurs clearly had a game plan for it. They knew what they were going to do. On the defensive end, they packed the paint as they did all game, and the Jazz were looking like they're going to have a tough time scoring. But frankly, we score a lot on that on just offensive rebounds and getting things done in that regard. The second thing I would point out is offensively what they were doing is isolating Tim Duncan on Jefferson, spreading the floor, making it too far for help to come. Though I'm not sure I have an enormous problem with that. And the reason I say that is that takes them out of the pick and roll game. So if they're going to go isolate Duncan in the post against the big lineup, I think that's a win for us. They're 29th in the NBA in post-up offense. I agree that Al's not the best defensive player in that circumstance, but I would say that I think it takes them out of what they're doing. I got some tweets from people. I even asked the question to Ron. I think this is a very reasonable question. Can you have somebody else guard Duncan? Ron's response was no, because if you're going to what's going to end up happening is that you end up with Al trying to guard Boris Diaw, and you'll notice that the other thing the Spurs did is they ran those guys around an awful lot. They made a lot of plays where they ran the guys all over the place, moving them, forcing the big guys to run, cover a lot of territory, and things of that sort, which has showed you that they had a game plan to what was going on there. And I think that makes it very difficult for the Jazz. I'm not sure that lineup is going to have the same effectiveness that it had prior. Finally, in regards to Josh Howard, wow, I'm at 19 minutes. That's partially because I was just doing a little research. I have a nice little nugget for you at the end of this. In regards to Josh Howard, the move actually made sense. If Josh Howard's healthy and DeMarre Carroll's healthy, you're going with Josh Howard in that circumstance. He's been there. He has the most experience on the roster. The only problem is when I looked at the rotation, that second lineup comes in. I don't know who is going to score. The second thing, as you all know, is I'm not a big fan of inefficient offensive players. That's what Josh is. But that move actually makes some sense. just because of the experience, the time. You're going to have too many guys out there who haven't started in a playoff game. Understand it, though. Damari does bring a lot of things. And I would say you just have to understand, hey, it didn't work. It didn't really not work either. I think we were outscored by 4 points with that lineup on the floor. Uh, and we had been playing ahead with Damari. But I will say this: the really faulty argument is saying, well, in the end of the regular season, that worked. It'll work now. The playoffs are such a different beast, and so many different things taking place that I'm not sure that that argument actually holds a great deal of water. So just that. Hey, I think Damari Carroll's a better player than Josh Howard. Possibly if Josh really is just a 40% offensive shooter, though he really rebounds well and does a lot of things. And you know, the Spurs are going to hold you on every cut and blast you on every movement, and he understands how to deal with that better than having been in the playoffs and played the Spurs. And so the move made sense. But I think the argument, your only argument is if you think Damari Carroll makes the team better. But if your argument is, well, it kept us going in the regular season, I'm not sure that's a very good argument. Final note for you. Just thought it was interesting that Amy Williams was tweeting out all of her excitement today about the fact that the new Brooklyn Nets logo and all that stuff is out there. Don't know what it means. Okay, here's your final note. This is my neat little tidbit. I won't even tweet this. I'll leave it just for you. In the last 143 minutes, okay, I'll tweet it later. In the last 143 minutes that Al Jefferson has played against Tim Duncan, he has shot 5 free throws. He is not going to shoot free throws in this series. He's going to have a hard time being an efficient scorer, and that's going to put a lot of burden on other guys. See ya.